Welcome to Alien Watchers, where we dive into the extraordinary, exploring the untold stories of alien civilizations, intergalactic struggles, and the unknown. In today's episode, we follow the journey of a regular human miner who, against all odds, is thrust into the heart of an ancient alien empire on the brink of collapse. Join us as we witness his rise from an ordinary man to the ruler of a dying world, and regular human miner accidentally becomes the king of a dying alien civilization. Jack had never believed in the impossible. His life, confined to the harsh, sunless mists of Virith, was as ordinary as they come. A miner by trade, Jack was used to the weight of the pickaxe in his calloused hands, the sound of metal striking stone, and the acrid scent of dust and minerals. Life on Virith was not easy. The planet's surface was barren, inhospitable to most forms of life. But beneath its surface, that was where the wealth lay, in veins of precious minerals that human colonists could mine to fuel their ambitions. For Jack, this wasn't the future of grand adventures or heroism. It was just a job, one that paid the bills for a solitary existence. The only family Jack had were the fleeting messages from his estranged brother back on Earth and the occasional passing of old friends from the mine. No one expected anything more from him than to show up every day and work the drills. And that's exactly what he did. But everything changed that day. Jack had been down in one of the deeper shafts of the mine, a place where the walls groaned under the weight of centuries of rock when the explosion struck. It wasn't supposed to happen. The equipment had been checked, the detonators were clear, and yet something went wrong. The force of the blast threw Jack against the rock face, knocking him unconscious. For a long while, everything was just darkness. He could hear the distant rumbling of collapsing tunnels, the screech of metal against stone, but nothing else. His head throbbed, and he fought against the dizziness that enveloped him. Finally, his eyelids fluttered open, and he groggily took in his surroundings. He was no longer in the familiar tunnels of the mine. The stench of dust and rock had been replaced by something otherworldly. The air around him felt alive with energy. Instead of cold, gray walls, he was surrounded by smooth, gleaming surfaces that hummed softly with a strange power. Jack pushed himself up from the floor, his body aching, his mind clouded with confusion. Where am I? The realization hit him like a cold wave. He wasn't in the mine anymore. Before him, rising from the ground, was a massive structure that looked both ancient and alien. The walls of the structure shimmered with an ethereal glow, their surfaces covered in intricate patterns and symbols that Jack couldn't begin to comprehend. It felt as if the very stone beneath his feet resonated with some kind of energy. Stumbling to his feet, Jack took a cautious step forward, his heart pounding in his chest. Was this some sort of advanced alien facility? He had read the reports about possible alien artifacts being found in distant corners of space, but he had never believed them. It was all just rumors, talk, things they didn't want to admit in the scientific journals. But now, standing here in the heart of this otherworldly structure, he couldn't deny the reality of it. His stomach churned with a mix of awe and terror. What was this place? How had he ended up here? "Hey, is anyone there?" Jack called out, his voice hoarse from the shock and dust. He waited, listening for any response, but the silence that followed felt like it was pressing in on him. The quiet was shattered by a distant, mechanical whir. Slowly, the walls of the chamber began to shift, and an opening appeared in the far side. Jack's instincts screamed at him to run, to get away from whatever force had drawn him here, but his curiosity held him in place. Out of the opening stepped a figure, tall, thin, and eerily calm. The creature before him was humanoid, but distinctly alien. It had smooth, blue-toned skin, and its eyes, large, almond-shaped, and shimmering with an unsettling light, fixed on him with an intensity that felt almost too knowing. Jack stood frozen, his breath caught in his throat. The creature tilted its head slightly, studying him as if Jack were the most curious thing it had seen in ages. "You are not of this world," the creature spoke, its voice melodic and soft, but with an alien resonance that sent chills down Jack's spine. Jack stumbled back, trying to make sense of what was happening. I don't understand. What is this place? Where am I?" The creature did not answer immediately. It simply stepped forward, its movements fluid and graceful, yet filled with an ancient power Jack couldn't comprehend. It raised a hand, and in that moment, the air around them seemed to shimmer. "You are in the city of Zalathar," the creature finally replied, "and you have been chosen." "Chosen? Chosen for what?" Jack asked, still reeling from the shock. The creature did not respond directly, but instead turned its gaze to something far beyond Jack, something that he couldn't see. Then, in a voice full of finality, it said, "You are the heir, the last hope for the Zalurians." Jack's mind raced, struggling to understand what this alien being meant. He was just a miner. He was nobody. He was not a leader, not a hero, not anyone who could save anyone. He was just Jack from Virith. But as the creature's gaze fixed upon him, a weight seemed to settle upon his shoulders. It was as if the universe itself had just thrust upon him a responsibility he had never asked for. Without another word, the creature gestured for Jack to follow. "Come," it said. "Your destiny awaits." As Jack followed the strange being through the alien corridors of Zalathar, he felt a mixture of fear and awe. His life had just been thrown into something unimaginable. And in that moment, he understood one thing. Everything he thought he knew had just been turned upside down. The world he had known, the life he had led, none of it mattered anymore. He was in a place beyond anything he could have ever imagined, and he was now a part of something far larger than himself. And as the creature led him deeper into the heart of Zalathar, Jack's future was being written in the stars. The hallways of Zalathar stretched out before Jack, a labyrinth of shimmering walls and strange bioluminescent lights that flickered as he passed. The air was thick with an energy that hummed faintly, almost as if the very atmosphere around him was alive. Jack's footsteps echoed in the otherwise silent corridors, and the sound felt out of place in a city so ancient, yet so technologically advanced. The creature who had introduced itself as Azura moved ahead with a fluid grace, its blue skin almost glowing in the dim light. Jack tried to keep up, his mind still reeling from the fact that he was in an alien city, in an entirely different world. How had he gone from working in a dusty mine to walking through the corridors of a place that looked like it belonged in the pages of a science fiction novel? "Where are we going?" Jack asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "What is this place?" Azura didn't turn to him, but its voice echoed back in his mind, cool and composed. "You are in Zalathar, the heart of our civilization. This city was once the pride of the Zalurians, a beacon of technological advancement and cultural achievement." Jack tried to wrap his head around the fact that this entire place, with its gleaming architecture and mysterious energy, was the center of an ancient civilization. He could hardly believe it, but the evidence was right in front of him. "You said I'm chosen." "Chosen for what? I'm just a miner," Jack said, frustration creeping into his voice. "I don't understand. How could I be the heir to anything?" Azura paused in front of a massive archway, its design intricate and swirling, much like the rest of the city. It turned to face Jack, its large eyes shining with an almost knowing sadness. "You are the heir because of an ancient prophecy," Azura said. "It has been foretold that a being not of our kind would come to save us when we were on the brink of extinction. The Zalurians have no ruler left. Our kingdom is dying, and our people have lost their will to fight." Jack felt the weight of Azura's words, each one sinking into him like a stone. He had no idea what he was supposed to do. A ruler? A savior? He was a worker, a man who had spent his life in a mine day after day, scraping the earth for minerals. What could he possibly know about saving a civilization? "What happened to your people?" Jack asked softly, trying to understand the gravity of the situation. "Why are you all dying?" Azura's expression remained unreadable, but Jack could feel the deep sorrow emanating from the creature. It began walking again, and Jack followed. "Our people once thrived," Azura explained. "We discovered ways to harness energy from the stars themselves, building technologies far beyond your understanding. But greed and division tore us apart. The Varnok, a rival race, attacked us, destroyed our colonies, and ravaged our resources. The wars lasted centuries, and now we are on the brink of collapse." Jack felt his stomach turn. The Varnok, an enemy race, had left the Zalurians on the verge of extinction. He couldn't imagine what kind of destruction could reduce an entire civilization to such a state. "So, this is all because of them? The war?" "Yes," Azura said. "And worse, our technology, once capable of restoring life to our planet, is now all but lost. The energy source we rely on, the Eterne, is dying. Without it, we cannot survive. It is hidden deep within the heart of our city, but it is not enough. We need a leader, a ruler who can restore balance, who can lead us into a new era. That is why the prophecy spoke of someone from beyond our world. Jack swallowed hard. He had never been one for prophecies, especially not ones about being chosen to save an entire civilization. But something in Azura's voice told him that this wasn't some wild tale. There was a real tangible desperation here. The two arrived at the central chamber of Zalathar, a vast open space with a massive domed ceiling that seemed to stretch beyond the horizon. At the center of the room was a giant crystal, glowing with an intense, pulsating light. It was as tall as a building and stood surrounded by strange machinery that hummed with life. The crystal Eterne was the source of the civilization's power, but it was faint now, flickering, dying. Azura turned to Jack. "This is the heart of our people," it said, its voice heavy. "The Eterne is a living thing, tied to the fate of our civilization. If it dies, so do we." Jack's eyes widened as he took in the sight of the crystal. It was beautiful, but it was also fragile, its light dimming with each passing second. "Is there any way to save it?" Jack asked, his voice barely a whisper. Azura's gaze softened. "That is why you are here. You are the one who can awaken the power of the Eterne. You have something that the Zalurians do not, an untainted will, free from the greed and corruption that once plagued us." Jack felt a surge of panic. "How am I supposed to do that? I'm just a man. I know nothing about your technology, your people, or your way of life." Azura's gaze softened with understanding. "The prophecy did not say you would be a perfect leader. It only said that you would possess the strength to see beyond your own limitations. You must learn, Jack. You must become the ruler you were meant to be." Before Jack could respond, a voice echoed through the chamber, breaking the silence. "Azura," the voice said, filled with a cold authority, "do not deceive him." Jack turned quickly, his heart racing. Standing in the doorway was a tall, imposing figure, Varnok, the general who had been introduced to him earlier. His dark blue skin was covered in battle scars, and his eyes gleamed with an unsettling intensity. "Varnok," Azura said, its voice calm but firm. "We have no time for division. We must work together if we are to survive." Varrok's lips curled into a smirk. "You believe that this outsider, this minor, is the key to saving us?" He stepped forward, his presence dominating the room. "I do not, and I will not bow to a prophecy that has led us into ruin." Jack felt the tension in the room rise as Varrok's eyes fixed on him, filled with disdain. Jack's pulse quickened, and for the first time he felt the weight of his newfound responsibility press heavily upon him. What had he gotten himself into? And how could he ever hope to lead these people to salvation when he could barely understand their plight? Azura stepped between Jack and Varnok, its voice a commanding calm. "The prophecy is clear, Varnok. There is no room for your doubt. We must follow this path, or we will perish." Varnok sneered but said nothing more, turning away with a bitter laugh. As he exited the chamber, Jack couldn't help but feel the looming presence of danger and division hanging over him. This was only the beginning. His journey had just started, and already, it felt like the weight of an entire civilization was pressing down on his shoulders. He turned back to the Eterne, the dying heart of Zalathar. If he truly was their heir, their king, he had no choice but to try and save them. But how? Where would he even begin? Azura placed a hand on his shoulder, its voice a soft whisper in his mind. "You will find the strength, Jack. You must." And so, with no other option, Jack began his journey. A journey not just for survival, but for the fate of an entire species. Jack couldn't sleep that night. The soft hum of the Eterne echoed through the walls of the chamber, a sound that felt both comforting and suffocating. He lay on a bed made of strange, smooth materials, the fabric soft but somehow cold to the touch. His mind raced, thoughts spinning faster than he could comprehend. How had he gone from a simple miner to a king, a ruler, a savior? The sheer absurdity of it made him laugh bitterly into the silence of the room. He had never asked for this, had never wanted any part in this alien prophecy. Yet here he was in a strange world on the brink of collapse with the weight of a dying civilization pressing on his shoulders. And to make matters worse, he wasn't even sure if he was capable of helping them. But as he lay there, staring at the dark ceiling, something else nagged at him. A feeling, like a whisper at the back of his mind, telling him that his life was not just some random accident. There was a reason he had been brought here. There had to be. The soft sound of footsteps outside the door startled Jack from his thoughts. He tensed, but the door slid open without a sound, revealing Solara, the woman who had been guiding him since his arrival. She stood in the doorway, her figure framed by the dim light that emanated from the city's glowing walls. Her sharp, intelligent eyes locked onto his with a look of quiet determination. "You're still awake," she said, her voice calm but tinged with concern. "I thought you might be," Jack sighed, sitting up in bed. "How can I sleep when I'm being thrust into something I don't even understand?" Solara walked into the room, her eyes scanning the dark surroundings before they settled on Jack. She crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. "I understand your frustration," she said, "but there's no time for hesitation. You've been chosen, Jack. Whether you like it or not, this is your responsibility now. You're the last hope for Zalathar, and you can either embrace your role or watch it all burn." Jack frowned. "I'm just a miner. I've spent my whole life underground, working with rocks and metal. I don't know the first thing about leading a civilization." "You'll learn," she said firmly. "You have no choice. The Zalurians are dying, and the Eterne is the only thing keeping us alive. If we lose it—" "Don't say it," Jack interrupted, his voice tight. "I know what's at stake, but that doesn't mean I'm the right person to fix it." Solara's eyes softened for a moment, and she moved closer to him. "You've already shown more bravery than most of our leaders. Your presence here isn't an accident. There's something about you, Jack. I believe you have the potential to save us." Jack shook his head. "You don't even know me. How can you believe in me?" "I've seen the prophecy," Solara said quietly. "It's not just some ancient myth. It's a part of our history, a part of our future. And in that future, you are the one who leads us to salvation. You just need to accept it." There was a long pause. Jack leaned back against the bed, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He wasn't a leader. He wasn't a hero. But somehow, deep down, he knew Solara was right. He had been chosen for something. He couldn't deny it any longer. "I don't know if I can be the ruler they need," Jack murmured, his voice barely audible. Solara stepped forward, her eyes intense. "It's not about being the ruler they need. It's about being the ruler they deserve. The ruler who will fight for them, who will do what must be done to protect them. That's what this is about." Jack took a deep breath and stood up, looking out the window at the city below. Zalathar was beautiful in a haunting way. Its golden streets and towering structures, now half destroyed by war, looked like a city on the edge of collapse. But there was still life here, still hope, faint though it may be. And that, Jack realized, was why he couldn't turn his back on them. "I'll do it," Jack said, turning back to Solara. "I'll try. I don't know how, but I'll try." A faint smile tugged at the corner of Solara's lips. "That's all we can ask. Come with me. There are things you need to see." She turned and walked toward the door, and Jack followed, without another word. There was no turning back now. He had made his decision. The two of them walked through the winding corridors of Zalathar, and Jack couldn't help but feel the weight of the city's history pressing down on him. The once thriving metropolis was a shadow of its former self, its streets eerily quiet, save for the occasional sound of footsteps echoing through the hollow spaces. As they entered the central hall, the vastness of the chamber took Jack's breath away. The walls were adorned with murals depicting the glorious past of the Zalurians, battles won, achievements made, and the flourishing of their civilization. But now, all of it seemed like a distant dream. The once bright murals were now faded, cracked with age, as if time itself had begun to erode their memory. At the center of the room stood the Council of the Zalurian Elders, a group of ancient beings who once guided the civilization with wisdom and power. Now their seats were empty, save for a few scattered figures who had taken on the role of the last remnants of leadership. Their faces were worn, their eyes tired, and the weight of their failure hung heavy in the air. Azura stood at the front, its tall form bathed in the glow of the central crystal, the Eterne. As Jack stepped forward, Azura turned to face him, its eyes full of hope and sadness. "Jack, this is the Council, the last of the Zalurian leadership," Azura said, gesturing to the figures gathered in the chamber. "They have agreed to follow you. You must begin your training. The future of Zalathar lies in your hands." Jack felt his heart race. The responsibility was too great, the pressure too overwhelming. But as he looked into the eyes of the people who had placed their trust in him, something inside him shifted. He had no choice now but to rise to the occasion. "Where do I begin?" Jack asked, his voice firm despite the uncertainty gnawing at him. Azura's voice was soft but filled with authority. "You must learn the ways of our people. The history, the science, the art of leadership. We will teach you what you need to know." Solara stepped forward, her gaze never leaving Jack. "But you must also learn who you are. Not just the heir to our civilization, but the leader of our future." And so, Jack's journey began, not just as the reluctant heir to a dying civilization, but as a man determined to prove that even someone like him could change the course of history. Jack stood at the edge of the balcony, looking out over Zalathar. The city stretched before him, its once proud towers now crumbling and half-finished, the streets silent and empty. He could feel the weight of it all, the past, the present, the future, pressing on his shoulders. The sky above was an eerie purple, a constant reminder that this world was far from ordinary. He turned his gaze back to the glowing crystal at the center of the city, the Eterne, pulsing faintly with a light that seemed to echo the heartbeat of Zalathar itself. It was the last source of power, and if Jack could not unlock its secrets, the civilization would wither away. But he still had so many questions, so many doubts. How was he supposed to lead them when he had no idea what it meant to be a leader? A king? A savior? Jack. The soft voice broke through his thoughts. He turned to find Solara standing a few feet away, her dark eyes fixed on him with an expression that was both sympathetic and resolute. "You're thinking too much," she said, her tone calm but knowing. "It's natural to feel this way. You're carrying the weight of an entire civilization on your shoulders." "I never asked for this," Jack muttered, his voice hoarse. I'm just a miner." Solara walked closer to him, her steps silent on the smooth stone floor. She stopped beside him, her gaze following his as it swept over the city. "And yet here you are, Jack. No one else came. You're the one who stepped forward, the one who survived the accident, the one who uncovered the truth. You didn't ask for this, but it's your responsibility now." Jack exhaled sharply, the gravity of her words sinking deeper into his chest. "I don't even know where to start. They expect me to be their leader, but I don't know what that even means. I've been digging for minerals my whole life." "Then you start with what you know," Solara said softly. "You've already started. The Eterne, the prophecy, it's all connected. The strength you need to lead is already within you. You just have to accept it." Jack shook his head. "I don't feel like any kind of king. I'm not the man they need." Solara's eyes softened, but there was still a trace of determination in her voice. "Maybe not yet, but you will be. You just need time. And the first step is learning from the people who've led Zalathar for centuries." Jack frowned. "You mean the council?" "Yes," she nodded. "The Zalurian council is the last of our leaders. They were once the guiding force of our civilization, the wisest among us. They may be old, tired, and broken, but they still know things that you need to learn. They will teach you." "And what if they don't trust me?" Jack asked. "What if they see me as an outsider, just some accident from another world?" "They will trust you," Solara said with a quiet confidence. "The prophecy speaks of an outsider, a leader from beyond our world. They know that you are the one, whether they like it or not. It's your fate." Jack turned away from her, his mind spinning. The pressure was unbearable. How was he supposed to guide a civilization he barely understood? He didn't belong here. He had no idea how to rule, how to unite a fractured, dying people. "Let's go," Solara said, breaking through his spiral of thoughts. "The council is waiting." The journey to the council chamber was long, and the atmosphere was thick with tension. The city, though beautiful in its alien architecture, seemed to be holding its breath, as if the very walls knew what was at stake. Jack couldn't help but feel that the entire place was teetering on the edge of something dangerous. As they approached the council's hall, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into the heart of the storm. He had seen the council before, but this time it was different. They weren't just figures of authority anymore. They were his teachers, his guides, or at least they were supposed to be. Inside the chamber, the council was gathered around a large table. The room was circular, with tall pillars lining the walls, each one covered in intricate carvings that seemed to pulse with a faint, otherworldly light. The members of the council, old and weathered by time, sat in their seats, watching Jack intently as he entered the room. Azura was at the head of the table, its deep blue skin and glowing eyes watching Jack as if assessing him. The others, seated in various positions around the table, turned their eyes toward him, some with curiosity, others with skepticism. "Jack," Azura said, its voice calm but authoritative, "you stand before us now, not as a stranger, but as the leader of our people, the one who will restore what was lost." Jack swallowed hard, the weight of their gazes pressing down on him. I'm not sure I'm the one you need." "You are the one we need," one of the elders, a tall, frail Zalurian with silver-gray skin, said with a raspy voice. "The prophecy has foretold this day, Jack. We have waited for you. The future of Zalathar depends on you." The other elders murmured in agreement, their faces unreadable. Jack could feel the tension in the room rising, the pressure building in his chest. He was standing in front of the last remnants of a once great civilization, and they were waiting for him to save them. But how could he? He didn't even know where to begin. "Do you understand the gravity of your position?" Azura asked, its tone soft but firm. "You have been chosen, not by us, but by fate. The Eterne, the heart of our people, is dying. Without it, we cannot survive." Jack nodded slowly, though he wasn't sure if he truly understood. "What do I have to do?" Azura's eyes softened slightly. "First, you must learn the ways of our people, the history, the science, the technology we once mastered. The Eterne is a living entity, and only someone with the right understanding can unlock its full potential. You must become more than just a king. You must become the key to our survival." Jack's heart raced. "And how do I do that? Where do I even start?" Solara stepped forward, her eyes determined. "We will teach you, Jack. The Council will guide you in understanding the ancient knowledge of our people. We will start with the basics, the history of the Zalurians, the rise and fall of our civilization, and the technology we once wielded." Azura nodded in approval. "You must learn the past before you can lead us into the future. Your training begins now." And so, Jack's education began. He was immersed in the history of the Zalurians, their rise to power, their fall into war and corruption, and the technologies that had once allowed them to harness the energy of stars. Every lesson felt like a blow to his pride, a reminder of how little he knew about the civilization he was now responsible for. But the more he learned, the more Jack began to understand. This was his role, his destiny. He was the one who could restore what had been lost, if only he could unlock the mysteries of the Eterne and convince the Council to trust him. The days blurred together as Jack's training under the Zalurian Council intensified. He woke each morning in the cold silence of his chamber, the weight of his new responsibilities pressing on him from every direction. The history of the Zalurian civilization was vast, its rise and fall a tale of great ambition and tragic failure. Yet, with each passing lesson, Jack felt a strange stirring inside him, a sense of purpose that had never been there before. Solara and Azura were his primary instructors, but the other council members occasionally lent their wisdom as well. Each day, Jack learned about a different facet of the Zalurian way of life, their advanced technologies, their scientific breakthroughs, and their complex social structures. However, it wasn't the history of their wars or their political failures that haunted Jack the most. It was the story of the Eterne, the living energy source that had once powered their world. The Eterne had been the foundation of everything. It had provided limitless power to Zalathar, allowing their civilization to flourish. But now, as Jack learned, it was dying. The once vibrant crystal at the center of the city was fading, its light growing dimmer by the day. Without the Eterne, there would be no hope for the Zalurians. But how was he supposed to restore it? How was he supposed to unlock the key to their salvation when he had no experience with something so alien? The Council, despite their deep knowledge, had grown complacent over the centuries. They had used the Eterne to fuel their power, but they no longer understood its true nature. Their connection to it had been severed over time, their reliance on it having dulled their ability to control it. They had all but given up. But Jack, as he continued his studies, began to uncover something that they hadn't seen, a pattern in the ancient texts, a clue in the designs of the Eterne itself. The key to unlocking its full potential didn't lie in technology, but in understanding the essence of the Eterne, its connection to life itself. One evening, after a particularly long day of study, Jack stood before the Eterne. It was an imposing sight, towering above him, its crystalline structure pulsating faintly in the dim light of the city. The hum of its energy was the heartbeat of Zalathar, and yet it was weak, its glow flickering like a dying ember. "Do you think it can be saved?" Jack asked softly, more to himself than to anyone else. Solara, who had been standing quietly beside him, didn't answer right away. She simply watched the Eterne with a quiet intensity, her face bathed in its glow. "I don't know," she said, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "I've spent my entire life studying it, and yet I still don't understand how to make it work. We've tried everything, Jack. We've tried technology, we've tried force, we've tried everything." She paused as if gathering her thoughts. "But what you said earlier about the Eterne being more than just a power source, that's what has me thinking. Maybe we've been looking at it all wrong." Jack turned to her, his eyes narrowing in curiosity. "What do you mean?" Solara stepped closer to the Eterne, her fingers brushing against the smooth surface of the crystal. "The Eterne is alive, Jack. It isn't just a machine. It's a living entity, connected to the life force of Zalathar. That's what the old texts say. We've been treating it like a tool, but it's more than that. It's part of us, part of everything here." Jack absorbed her words, feeling a flicker of realization. The Eterne was more than just a source of energy. It was the lifeblood of their world, their civilization, their very existence. The ancient texts had spoken of a time when the Zalurians had lived in harmony with the Eterne, using its power not just for technology, but for spiritual connection as well. But somewhere along the way, that connection had been lost. "You're saying the Eterne's energy is tied to us?" Jack asked, trying to make sense of it. Solara nodded. "Exactly. It's connected to the life force of Zalathar, to the people who live here. If we're to restore it, we have to reconnect with that power. We have to understand the Eterne not as a machine, but as a living force, something that feeds on life and energy, not just technology." Jack thought about it for a moment to have the enormity of her words sinking in. He wasn't just learning to rule a dying civilization. He was being asked to restore a piece of it, something deeper and more mysterious than anything he had ever encountered. But how? How could he, a simple miner from Earth, possibly hope to understand something so intricate, so alien? "I don't know if I'm ready for this," Jack said quietly, his voice tinged with doubt. "I've been pretending to be a king, but I'm not. I'm just a man who's been thrown into a situation I don't understand." Solara turned to him, her eyes softening with understanding. "You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be willing to learn. You already have what it takes, Jack. The Council sees it. I see it. You have the strength to lead us. You have the will to save us." Jack's eyes lingered on the Eterne, its faint pulse almost beckoning him. He could feel the weight of everything pressing down on him, the fate of an entire civilization hanging by a thread. But in that moment, something shifted inside him. Maybe he wasn't a king, maybe he wasn't the ruler they had hoped for, but he was the one who was here now. He was the one who had been chosen, and maybe that was enough. "I'll do it," Jack said, his voice steady for the first time. "I'll learn what I need to know. I'll unlock the power of the Eterne. I won't let this civilization die." Solara smiled, a flicker of hope shining in her eyes. "That's all we need, Jack. We'll do this together." The following days were filled with intense study and meditation. Jack spent hours each day sitting before the Eterne, trying to connect with its energy. He learned about the ancient rituals the Zalurians had once performed, the ways they had synchronized their minds and spirits with the crystal. But as he meditated, he felt an overwhelming sense of doubt. The energy was powerful, but it was also elusive, as if it was teasing him, just out of reach. Then, one evening, as Jack sat alone in the chamber, something extraordinary happened. The Eterne's light flickered brighter, its pulse steadying for the first time in days. Jack's heart raced as he reached out, his fingers brushing against the crystal's surface. The moment he touched it, a surge of energy shot through him, so intense that he felt as though his body was vibrating with it. Visions filled his mind, images of ancient Zalurians working in harmony with the Eterne, their hands glowing with energy as they connected with the crystal. He saw them using the power to heal, to create, to sustain their civilization. He saw their downfall, too, Their greed and their desire for power had corrupted their connection to the Eterne, severing the bond that had once made them great. Jack gasped, pulling his hand away from the crystal. He was shaken, overwhelmed by the flood of images, but he understood now. The key to unlocking the Eterne's power wasn't technology, it was understanding harmony and balance. He had to restore that balance. The weight of the Eterne's energy still thrummed in Jack's mind, like a distant echo. Since that first connection, his perception of the world had shifted. He no longer saw the Eterne merely as an object of science and power. It was a living entity, a force of nature with a spirit and purpose all its own. The ancient Zalurians had known this, and now Jack was beginning to understand. Yet the knowledge alone was not enough to save them. Jack. Solara's voice cut through the deep meditation he had been lost in. He opened his eyes slowly, the soft light of the Eterne flickering in the chamber as he turned to face her. Her expression was thoughtful, but there was an underlying urgency in her gaze. "You've made progress," she said, stepping closer, her silhouette outlined by the Eterne's glow. "But there is still much you need to understand. The Eterne is more than a tool. It is a mirror of Zalathar's soul. It will only respond to the purity of the people's hearts, to the will of their leader." Jack stood up, rubbing the back of his neck, the words heavy on his mind. "I don't know if I'm ready. What if I fail them? What if I can't fix it?" "That is why I'm here," Solara said with a gentle smile. "We will do this together. But first, there is a test. You cannot fully unlock the Eterne's power until you've proven yourself worthy." Jack's brow furrowed in confusion. "A test? What kind of test?" Solara's eyes became more serious. "The Varnok are coming." Jack's heart skipped a beat. "What? How do you know?" "We've been monitoring their movements," she said, her tone tight with worry. "They've been getting closer, and with each passing day, their forces grow stronger. They won't wait forever. If we don't act soon, they'll take Zalathar and finish what they started." Jack felt his chest tighten. He had only just begun to understand the Zalurians' history, their struggle. And now this, the Varnok, the very race that had brought Zalathar to the brink of extinction. The thought of facing them terrified him. He wasn't prepared for war. He wasn't even sure he was prepared to be a king. "But the Eterne," Jack started, his voice uncertain. Solara raised a hand to stop him. "The Eterne is connected to all life here, Jack. It will not aid us if we are not united. This is where you come in. The Eterne responds to the strength of the leader, to their resolve. If you cannot command the trust of your people, you cannot command the crystal. And if you cannot command the crystal, we have no chance against the Varnok." A sense of urgency began to gnaw at Jack's insides. He understood now. The test wasn't just about his connection to the Eterne, but about proving he could be the leader they needed. He had to gain the trust of the Zalurians, unite them, and show them he was worthy of their faith. He had to prove to them and to himself that he could lead them to victory. "What do I have to do?" Jack asked, his voice a mixture of fear and determination. And Solara's eyes softened as she looked at him. "You must go before the people. Show them that you are their king. Gather them and lead them in a demonstration of your strength, not through force, but through your spirit. The Eterne will respond to that." Jack nodded, steeling himself for what was to come. He wasn't sure he could do this. He wasn't a politician, a general, or even a noble. He was just a man. But he had to try, for Zalathar, for the people who had placed their trust in him. He had no other choice. The crowd gathered in the central square of Zalathar, their faces a mixture of hope, skepticism, and fear. Jack stood at the front, his heart pounding in his chest. The sound of murmurs rippled through the gathered Zalurians as he stepped forward, flanked by Solara and Azura. For a moment, everything seemed to hang in the balance. Jack had never felt so exposed, so vulnerable. He was about to face the people who would decide his fate, people who had every right to doubt him. To them, he was still a stranger, a foreigner, and yet they had no other leader to turn to. Azura stepped forward, its voice cutting through the murmurs. "People of Zalathar," it began, its tone commanding. "You have gathered here today to witness a test, the test of our future, a test of our faith." Jack could feel the weight of the moment pressing on him. This was it. This was his chance to prove himself. Azura continued, "This man, Jack, is our leader. He is the one who has been chosen by the Eterne, by our prophecy. He will prove to you today that he is the ruler we need. Jack could feel the skepticism in the air, like a cold breeze brushing against his skin. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. He had to speak. He had to show them he was worthy of their trust. He stepped forward, his voice hesitant at first, but growing stronger with each word. I don't come from your world. I'm not like any of you, but I've seen your pain, I've seen your loss, and I understand now that this city, this people, are worth fighting for. He paused, letting the words sink in. He could feel their eyes on him, judging him, but he couldn't falter now, not when everything depended on him. I am not a king, he continued, his voice steadying. I am a man who has been chosen, not because of some prophecy, but because I believe in what this city can be. I believe in Zalathar. I believe in you. He took another step forward, feeling the weight of his words. We've been through so much, but we are still here. We are still standing, and together we will fight. Together we will reclaim what was lost. We will restore the Eterne, and we will make Zalathar great again. The crowd was silent, their faces unreadable. Jack's heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't look away. He couldn't, not now. Let us begin, he said, his voice low but resolute. Let us prove to ourselves that we are worthy of this future. For a long moment there was no sound, but then, slowly, the people began to murmur. The whispers grew louder, turning into a chant of unity, of hope, of belief. The Eterne, which had been faint and dim for so long, suddenly flared with light, its energy pulsing through the city like a heartbeat. Jack felt the power of it surge through him, as if the crystal itself was responding to his words, to the faith that the Zalurians had placed in him. The test was not over, but Jack had taken the first step. He had shown them his strength, his resolve, his will to fight for them, and the Eterne had responded. The days following Jack's speech were filled with a sense of restless anticipation. The people of Zalathar had rallied behind him, their faith in him growing stronger with each passing moment. The once skeptical murmurs had been replaced by whispers of hope. The energy within the city had shifted, a quiet but palpable undercurrent of determination flowing through the streets. The Eterne, the heart of their civilization, had responded to Jack's plea, and now there was no turning back. But even as the people embraced Jack's leadership, there was still a storm on the horizon. The Varnok, the ruthless enemy that had nearly destroyed the Zalurian Empire, were closing in. Reports from the outer colonies confirmed what Jack and the Council had feared. The Varnok were amassing their forces, preparing to strike. They would not wait for Zalathar to recover. They would come to finish what they had started. Jack stood on the balcony once again, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon where the first light of dawn barely touched the sky. The city around him was a mixture of ancient wonder and crumbling ruin. The streets below were busy with workers, soldiers, and citizens, people going about their daily lives, unaware of the danger that lurked just beyond their reach. Solara joined him, her presence a calming one, though her expression was as serious as Jack's. "We don't have much time," she said softly, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "The Varnok are preparing for war. We've received word from the outer colonies. They've been hit hard. We're the last standing, Jack." Jack turned to her, his face grim. "I know. I've been thinking about that all night. How do we stand a chance against them? Our technology is outdated, and the Eterne is still dying. What can we do?" Solara's eyes met his, and for a moment there was silence between them. Then she spoke, her voice calm but resolute. "You've already done more than we could have hoped for, Jack. The people trust you now. That's the first step. The second step is preparing for battle. We must unite the forces of Zalathar, our soldiers, our scientists, our engineers, and we must make the Eterne our weapon. It's our only chance." Jack nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "I can't do this alone." "You won't have to," Solara said firmly. "We're in this together. The Council will help, the people will fight, and the Eterne will give us the strength we need. But it will take all of us, united." As if on cue, the sound of footsteps approached from behind. Turning, Jack saw Azura entering the balcony, its tall form silhouetted against the morning light. The creature had been a steadfast ally, its wisdom guiding Jack in ways Jack had never expected. But even Azura now carried an air of urgency. "It is time," Azura said, its voice filled with a quiet resolve. "We must prepare. The Varnok will come soon, and we must be ready." Jack's heart sank. How soon? Within days, Azura replied. The Varnok are quick and they are merciless. If we do not act now, they will destroy everything. Jack's mind raced. There was so much to do, so much they still didn't understand, and yet there was no more time for hesitation. The future of Zalathar, and perhaps the entire galaxy, was hanging in the balance. We need a plan, Jack said, his voice growing more determined. A real plan. How do we fight back? How do we protect the Eterne and the city? Solara stepped forward, pulling out a data tablet from her belt. The screen flickered to life, displaying a map of Zalathar's remaining defenses, the layout of the city, and the positions of key military assets. We've already begun fortifying the city, she said, pointing to various sections of the map. The outer walls are reinforced, and we've been scavenging what we can from the old war machines. But we need more than just physical defenses. We need a way to disrupt the Varnok's forces, disrupt their energy systems, their technology. That's where the Eterne comes in, Jack said, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to click together. If we can tap into its energy, maybe we can turn it against them. But we'll need to harness its power more effectively. Right now, it's only responding to the will of the people, but we need it to be a weapon. Solara's eyes brightened. Exactly. But we don't have much time to experiment. We need to gather our best engineers and scientists and start working on it immediately. Jack's mind raced. There was no room for error. The Varnok were merciless, and if they were able to breach the city, all hope for Zalathar would be lost. But if they could harness the power of the Eterne, if they could unite the people and their resources, maybe, just maybe, they could stand a chance. We'll start at once, Jack said, his voice steady and resolute. Get the council, gather the people. We need to prepare for war. As Solara and Azura turned to execute their plans, Jack remained on the balcony for a moment longer, his gaze turning once more to the horizon. The sun was rising, its light slowly creeping across the city. It was a new day, but whether it would be the dawn of a new era for Zalathar or the end of it all, Jack didn't yet know. The next few days were a blur of activity and chaos. Zalathar's streets, which had once been so quiet, now buzzed with the energy of preparation. Soldiers trained in the shadow of the crumbling city walls, engineers worked tirelessly to modify ancient machines, and scientists from all corners of the city gathered in makeshift labs, scrambling to decipher the secrets of the Eterne. Jack had thrown himself into the work, trying to lead by example. He knew the stakes, and he knew that every decision he made could determine the fate of Zalathar. There was no room for mistakes. At night, he would return to the chamber where the Eterne pulsed faintly, still struggling to unlock its full potential. He had begun to understand it, in a way, not just as a power source, but as something that was alive, something that responded to intention, to the will of the people. But that was not enough. To use it as a weapon, they needed more than just connection. They needed mastery. They needed control. One evening, as Jack sat meditating in front of the Eterne, the room grew still. The hum of the crystal grew louder, its pulse more steady, almost as if it were responding to his presence. Jack placed his hands on the cool surface of the crystal, focusing on it, feeling the energy ripple through him. He concentrated harder, pushing his mind beyond its limits, reaching for the core of the Eterne's power. Suddenly, a surge of energy shot through his body, a rush of power so intense that Jack gasped, pulling his hands away. The room around him seemed to shimmer, and for a moment he saw the vision of Zalathar's past, the great cities, the thriving culture, and the terrifying destruction wrought by the Varnok. It all flashed before his eyes in a dizzying torrent of memories, both ancient and recent. He understood now. The Eterne was not just a power source, it was a reflection of Zalathar itself, a mirror of their past, their present, and their future. If they could harness it, they could win. But they had to act quickly. They couldn't afford to wait any longer. Jack stood up, determination flooding his veins. It's time. The final hours before the Varnok's arrival were a blur of preparations, sweat, and tension. Zalathar's streets were filled with activity, the once quiet city now alive with a sense of urgency. The hum of machinery mixed with the murmur of soldiers and citizens alike, all working toward one singular goal: survival. Every corner of the city had been fortified, and its ancient defenses reactivated. But even as the people worked, there was an underlying fear that no amount of preparation could fully shield them from what was coming. Jack stood on the balcony of the central palace, looking out over the city. The Eterne's faint glow had become brighter in the last few days, as if responding to the renewed spirit of the people. But Jack knew that it was still not enough. The Varnok were ruthless, and their forces were vast. Zalathar, for all its might, was a shadow of what it once was. He could feel the weight of his decision pressing on him like a physical force. The sky above was darkening, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. The Varnok were near. "You've done everything you could," Solara's voice broke through Jack's thoughts. She had come to stand beside him, her eyes scanning the horizon. "The people are ready. The Eterne is responding. We've prepared as best as we can." Jack didn't answer immediately. He felt the growing uncertainty in his chest. The plan had been set in motion. Engineers had connected the Eterne's energy to the city's defenses, using it to power weapons, shields, and communication systems. But even with all the power they had, could they really defeat the Varnok? "Is it enough?" he asked quietly, not looking at her. Solara was silent for a moment. "We've made it our last stand, but I believe in you, Jack. I believe in what you've awakened here. You've proven that you are the leader this people need. Now, we fight." Jack nodded, though the knot in his stomach remained tight. He had always been a miner, a man who spent his days digging into the earth, searching for resources. Now he was a king, a leader, the last hope of a dying civilization. It was almost impossible to comprehend the transformation he had undergone. But as he stood here, on the edge of the precipice, he knew there was no turning back. The distant rumble of thunder echoed through the air, a sound that felt like a warning from the universe itself. The Varnok were coming. The battle began at dawn. The Varnok ships descended from the skies in a terrifying display of power, massive warships that blocked out the sun as they hovered above Zalathar. Their ships were dark, jagged, like predatory creatures ready to strike. A roar of battle cries and the deafening sound of weapon fire filled the air as the Zalurian forces engaged the Varnok. Jack could hear the clash of metal and the hum of energy weapons as they met in the sky. From the palace balcony, Jack watched as the city's defenses lit up, shields of energy springing to life around the outer walls, absorbing blasts from the Varnok ships. The city's weapons fired in retaliation, their beams of energy slicing through the sky. "We need to be on the front lines," Jack said, turning to Solara. His voice was sharp with urgency. "The people need to see me. They need to know I'm with them." Solara nodded, her face hard with determination. "Follow me." The streets of Zalathar were chaos. The sound of battle filled the air as Jack and Solara made their way toward the central command center. Soldiers fought in the streets, repelling the Varnok's assault with everything they had. The streets had become a war zone, debris from fallen ships scattered among the ruins of the ancient city. But the people fought on, their spirits unbroken. As Jack moved through the streets, he could see the faces of the Zalurians, fear, pain, and determination etched in every one of them. They were fighting for their homes, their families, their future. And at the center of it all was Jack, leading them into battle. They arrived at the command center just as the first wave of Varnok's soldiers began to breach the outer defenses. The room was filled with officers, engineers, and strategists, people who had spent their lives preparing for this moment. Now, it was up to them to execute the final plan. Jack stepped forward, his voice steady despite the chaos outside. "Prepare the Eterne to launch its final offensive," he said. "We don't have much time." A group of engineers began to activate the necessary systems, tapping into the power of the Eterne to fuel the city's last weapon, a devastating pulse of energy capable of turning the tide of the battle. The room buzzed with activity, the energy palpable as the final countdown began. Outside, the Varnok forces were closing in. Jack could see their war machines advancing toward the city, their numbers overwhelming. But he didn't flinch. This was their moment. They were ready. The engineers finished their work, and the Eterne's pulse began to build. A low hum filled the air as the energy from the crystal poured into the city's weaponry. The very ground beneath Jack's feet seemed to vibrate with power. "Launch it," Jack commanded. The energy shot into the sky, a massive beam of light so bright it could be seen from the farthest reaches of the planet. It tore through the Varnok ships, disintegrating them in an instant. The ground shook as the pulse continued, cutting through the Varnok's forces like a blade through paper. In a matter of moments, the tide of the battle shifted. For a moment, the sky was quiet. The Varnok ships had been destroyed. Jack stood there, staring at the remains of the Varnok forces. It was over. Zalathar had won. The Eterne had been the key to their victory, its power unleashed in a final, desperate act. But the victory came at a cost. The Eterne flickered once more, its pulse growing weak again. The energy that had powered the city and destroyed the Varnok was quickly draining. Zalathar's future still hung in the balance, but for now, they had won. Jack turned to Solara, who stood beside him, her face a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "We did it," Jack said, his voice hoarse from the emotion that swelled inside him. Solara nodded, her eyes softening. "Yes, but this is just the beginning." Jack took a deep breath. "I know, the Eterne has responded, but we must rebuild. We must restore what was lost and create a new future for Zalathar." With the Varnok defeated, Jack knew that their journey was far from over. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but now, more than ever, he was ready to lead. And Zalathar, for the first time in centuries, had hope. In this final chapter, Jack faces the full scale of the Varnok's attack and leads the people of Zalathar into their last stand. Using the power of the Eterne, Jack and his people manage to defeat the Varnok forces, but the victory comes with the realization that Zalathar's future is still uncertain. The Eterne has given them a chance, but now it is up to Jack to rebuild the civilization and lead it into a new era. Jack's transformation is complete. He started as a miner, a man who didn't belong in this world. But now he was the ruler they needed, the leader who would carry Zalathar into the future. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the journey of Jack and his rise to power, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Alien Watchers, and hit the bell icon to stay updated on our latest content. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What part of the story intrigued you the most? Stay tuned for more thrilling sci-fi adventures, and remember, keep watching the skies. Until next time.